I'm going to show you 30 words and phrases to get the highest possible score in IELTS. This is vocabulary that has helped thousands of my students get band 7, 8 and even 9 in the IELTS test. For each answer, I'll give you the vocabulary, a model answer, and don't worry about taking notes because I've got a PDF with all of the information which I'll put below this video. My name is Eli and I run the website EnglishProTips.com where we help people like you get ready for the IELTS test. So, on with the lesson. The first phrase we're going to learn today is foreseeable future. This means as far as you can plan into the future. So as far into the future as you can plan. It might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 years, it might be 10 years. The idea is foreseeable future describes what you can plan for. Now, this is a great phrase for the IELTS test. Listen to the pronunciation. Foreseeable future. Foreseeable future. I don't have any intention to move home in the foreseeable future. So you could say this in part 1 of the IELTS test. The examiner asks, do you think you will move home? And you can say, well, I don't have any intention to move home in the foreseeable future. And they'll be very impressed. I'd like to have kids at some point, but not in the foreseeable future. Okay, this is a very common phrase. I'd like to do something at some point in the distant future, but I don't have any intention in the foreseeable future. Now, we often use foreseeable future when we're describing something that we're not planning to do immediately, but we will consider at some point. So, for example, I would like to change my career at some point, but not in the foreseeable future. I'd like to have kids at some point, but not in the foreseeable future. Okay, let's look at a question and a model answer for this. Do you think you will continue to live in this home for a long time? This is a very common part 1 question. I don't have any plans to move in the foreseeable future. Perhaps at some point I would like to move to Spain, but for now I'm very happy living in Edinburgh. Lots of my friends and family are here, and even though the winters can be horribly cold, it's very nice being in Scotland in the summer as there are so many beautiful places to explore. Okay, you can see there's lots of useful vocabulary in this answer. Don't worry about that. You can download the PDF below this lesson and you're going to get all of these model answers, so no need to take notes. However, if you do want some extra help, then definitely check out my vocabulary course at EnglishProTips.com. In the course, you'll find model answers and vocabulary for all of the common topics in IELTS, and I'll help you learn this vocabulary through quizzes, model answers, and different activities. But for now, on with the next word. The next word is invaluable. Invaluable. This means extremely useful or valuable. Listen to the pronunciation. Invaluable. Your help and guidance has been invaluable. I can't thank you enough. So if someone helps you, you can say, your help and guidance has been invaluable. I can't thank you enough. I got invaluable experience from doing the internship. So we often have particular collocations. So collocations are words that go together. So some common collocations with invaluable are invaluable help, invaluable support, invaluable experience. Let's look at a model answer. Do you think doing work experience can be useful for high school students? For sure it can. A lot of high school students get invaluable experience and knowledge from having the opportunity to do an internship or some sort of work experience. However, I always think it's better if people are paid for work experience, as ultimately they are offering a service. Okay, remember, you don't need to take notes on this vocabulary. It's all in the PDF below. On with the next word. The next word is decade. Decade. It's an uncountable noun and it means a period of 10 years. Listen to the pronunciation and repeat after me. Decade. decade. So stress is on the first syllable, decade. It's not decade, it's decade. So I love the 80s. The 80s was a wonderful decade. The 80s is when I was born. But you could say things like, I've worked as an accountant for almost a decade, or I've worked as a nurse for almost a decade. I moved to Spain about a decade ago. So someone might say, well, where do you live? You can say, oh, I live in Spain. I moved to Spain about a decade ago, which means you moved to Spain 10 years ago. Now, you can use this in the IELTS writing and speaking exam. All of the vocabulary that we're going to look at, we can use interchangeably between the writing and the speaking, unless I tell you otherwise. However, decade is particularly useful for the IELTS writing test in task 2, but also in academic task 1, where you're going to say things like, there has been a substantial increase in technology companies over the last decade, because you get lots of line graphs and bar graphs that show dates in divisions of 10 years. So you can explain that you know that by using the word decade. Okay. Have you been living in this home for a long time? Actually, I moved to Scotland around a decade ago. I lived in various different areas, but I've only settled in the south of Edinburgh for the last 2 years. What I like about it is that there are lots of beautiful green areas dotted around the south of Edinburgh, and I don't have any intention to move in the foreseeable future. I hope you noted the word foreseeable future at the end of this model answer. On with the next word. This is wonderful. It's the kind or the type of person who. This is a phrase for describing the typical behavior of someone. So you would use this in the IELTS speaking test, but not necessarily the IELTS writing test. It's more colloquial and relaxed. It's not really appropriate for IELTS writing. Listen to the pronunciation. The kind of person who. The type of person who. So it's kinda, typer. It's that schwa sound. Kind of person who. Type of person who. Try it. Kind of person who, type of person who. Almost sounds like a different language. He's the kind of person who goes to bed at the same time every night. He's very organized. I'm the kind of person who needs to have a cup of coffee in the morning before studying. She's the type of person who always arrives late for parties. Perhaps you've got a friend like that. Let's look at a model model question and answer. Are you the kind of person who likes to wake up early in the morning? Not really, no. It's not that I like to wake up late, I just like to wake up at a natural time when I feel that I've rested enough. I've never really been the type of person that feels that I have to wake up at the crack of dawn in order to make the most of the day. So I'll usually sleep for around 7 or 8 hours and get up around 7 or 8 in the morning. Perhaps at the weekend I'll sleep in slightly longer. Okay, next word. Materialistic, a bit like this lady just below me. She's materialistic, she just loves shopping. So what does materialistic mean? Well, it means that believing that having money and possessions is the most important thing in life. Materialistic, materialistic. Older generations feel that the youth are too materialistic, always shopping for new clothes or the latest smartphone. So we can say materialistic society, materialistic person, materialistic generation. So this is when we're using it as an adjective. However, we can also use the noun form, materialism. She writes about the greed and materialism of modern society. So impress your examiner by using advanced words like materialistic and materialism, but make sure you use it in the correct context. Speaking of which, let's look at a question. What are some problems with being materialistic? So this is a possible part 3 question in your exam. Right, tough question. Well, to begin with, it requires a lot of money. If a lot of your happiness comes from buying new things, then you'll need a lot of money to constantly be satisfied. It also strikes me as not being very sustainable. I imagine someone who is materialistic will constantly require newer, better, and more expensive products in order to be satisfied. I think it's a lot more sustainable to find happiness and meaning in life through other things like friendship, relationships, and doing good in the world. Okay, remember, you can take some notes from this if you want, but the PDF is below this lesson. Next word is status symbol, or if you're in the US, status symbol. So, status symbol, what does it mean? It means something that people want or have because they think other people will respect them for it. If you own a car like this, below me, then that's a status symbol. You're doing it to kind of try and get respect from other people. Possibly, most likely. Status symbol, status symbol. UK, status symbol. US, status symbol. Cars act as a status symbol, used American pronunciation there, for many people. Or cars act as a status symbol for many people. So we can say things like act as, or represent, or are a status symbol. Let's look at a model question and answer. Why do you think some people like to spend a lot of money on jewellery? This is a very common part 1 question, also appears in part 3 of the speaking test. It's very common, and you can replace the word jewellery with other things like expensive clothing or expensive cars. So why do you think people like to spend a lot of money on jewellery? Well, I think it acts as a status symbol. Again, US pronunciation. It's a way of showing the world how rich and successful you are. You're able to buy something that other people can't afford. I wouldn't want to speculate too much, as I'm not the kind of person who spends a lot of money on jewellery, but I imagine that at the heart of it, it is a desire to be seen as special. Possibly. Next word, a people person. So a nice informal phrase that we would use in IELTS speaking. It means someone who is friendly and enjoys meeting and talking to other people. The guy below me looks like a people person, and so does the girl. They're smiling, they're having a good time in a sociable context. So yes, IELTS speaking, maybe not IELTS writing. Listen to the pronunciation. People person. People person. I've never been much of a people person. I prefer to stay at home with a good book. I'm an introvert, but my best friend is a real people person. She's a total people person, always making friends wherever she goes. Okay, are you a people person, or do you prefer to spend time alone? Well, I'd say I'm a mix. I like spending time with close friends and I enjoy meeting people for the first time, but I'm not a big fan of spending time in large groups. So I don't really enjoy parties or going out to bars or restaurants with large groups of friends. That's true. What about you? Are you a people person? You can always comment below this video. Next word is work-life balance. This is a buzzword of our generation now. People are talking a lot about their work-life balance. So this is the amount of time that you spend doing your job compared to the amount of time that you spend doing things that you enjoy, like leisure activities. For me, rock climbing, going for walks, these are my favorite leisure activities, and I balance that with my work, which is this, making videos for IELTS for you. Listen to the pronunciation. Work-life balance. Work-life balance. Smart employers know that workers who have a good work-life balance are more dependable, loyal, and productive. It's true. So what can people do to improve their work-life balance? Well, most people who complain about their work-life balance are in stressful and demanding jobs. I guess many of these people might want to consider a different job or possibly even a different career. However, I feel a bit insensitive saying that. It's not like people can simply switch jobs or switch their entire career easily. They might have spent a long time training to be in a certain career or have people that depend on them to work hard and make money. Next word is fatigue. A bit like exhaustion, it describes extreme tiredness. This person below me is suffering from fatigue. You can see they've fallen asleep on their keyboard at their desk. They obviously don't have a good work-life balance. Listen to the pronunciation, fatigue. Fatigue is fatigue. It's not fatigue, it's fatigue. the schwa sound. Many students suffer from fatigue as a result of stress in the run-up to the exams. In the run-up to, what a great phrase. It means when you're about to do your exams, in the run-up to exams. So you can suffer fatigue, so suffer from fatigue, or battle fatigue, which means that it's causing a lot of problems, but you're battling with it. You're trying to get your life back. You can also talk about physical or mental fatigue. So are you tired in your body, or are you tired in your brain? If you've been working too hard, then possibly you've got mental fatigue. But if you've been going to the gym too much, you've probably got physical fatigue. You can also have extreme or severe fatigue. These are the kind of collocations that would get you those really high scores in IELTS. And then if you really want to impress the examiner, you can use this. Onset of fatigue, which means the beginning of fatigue. So you could say something like, I need to adjust my work-life balance because I felt the onset of fatigue, which means I felt the beginning of fatigue. What can people do to avoid fatigue? Well, I guess the most important thing is to make sure you're sleeping enough. If you're working or studying a lot and not getting enough sleep, well, that's basically a recipe for disaster. Great phrase. There are countless studies that emphasize how essential it is to sleep for 7 or 8 hours per night. So I wouldn't underestimate the importance of getting enough sleep. Next word is diligent. This scientist below me is diligent. What does it mean? It means careful and using a lot of effort, just like the scientist below me. Pronunciation, diligent, diligent. So stress is on the first syllable, diligent. Diligent students tend to do better in exams than those that try and cram last minute. Cram means to study very quickly just before your exam. Bad idea. Diligent, be diligent, start studying now. And get ready to do your exam in 6 months, for example, and learn from English Pro Tips videos because they will help you. So we can talk about a diligent student, and we can also talk about diligence, which is the noun form. You can say things like, they carry out their work with diligence and care. Or you can use the adverb form, diligently. The students diligently completed all the tasks they were given. Were you a diligent student in high school? Difficult part 1 question, here's how I would answer. Not really. There were some subjects like math and English that I took seriously and studied a lot for. However, in general, I wasn't a particularly diligent student. My best friend was in most of my classes and he was such a distraction. He told amazing stories and I was always more interested in what he had to say than the teacher. True. I remember it used to drive my teachers mad and we'd often get in trouble for talking too much. Next word is rapport. Rapport, the T at the end is silent. So rapport means to have a good understanding with someone and the ability to communicate with them. So for example, a teacher needs to have a good rapport with their students, or workers in the same company need to have a good rapport. Pronunciation? Rapport. Listen, you cannot hear that T. Rapport. It's not rapport, it's rapport. Stress is on the final syllable, rapport. It's important for teachers to develop a good rapport with their students. Yes. So we can say build or establish a rapport, and we can say friendly, good, or close rapport. All good collocations. So what can teachers do to make sure they have a good rapport with their students? Now, I'd say there are a few things that they can do. First of all, they can learn their students' names. This might sound simple, but there are many teachers that don't bother to learn their students' names, and this is a huge obstacle to developing a good relationship. Secondly, I'd say it's important for there to be mutual respect. Teachers should encourage a respectful relationship by arriving on time to class, making their classes interesting, and being kind to all students, not just their favorite ones. Great. Next is inquisitive. Wanting to discover as much as you can about things, sometimes in a way that annoys people. Let me explain. So pronunciation, inquisitive. Inquisitive. Stress is on the second syllable, inquisitive. Ba 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 ba, inquisitive. Children should be encouraged to be inquisitive and ask lots of questions in school. So we can talk about being inquisitive about something, and we can have inquisitive child or student, or an inquisitive mind, someone who's naturally eager to find out as much about the world. I always complain that my mum is too nosy, however, she just says that she's inquisitive. So, do you know any particularly inquisitive people? Yes, I have a 5-year-old cousin who is especially inquisitive. She's always asking her parents, why? Why this? Why that? She's the kind of person who wants to fully understand everything, and it sometimes drives her parents mad. Next word is studious. Someone that likes to spend a lot of time studying. Studious, studious. Teachers tend to like children that are intelligent and studious. So we can talk about a studious child, a studious student, or a studious boy or girl. And we've got the adverb as well, studiously. He gets on with his work quietly and studiously. Do you think that girls are more studious than boys? This is a real IELTS question, and it's very tricky to answer because you don't really want to make big generalizations about boys and girls. So look at the way that I do that. Well, I wouldn't want to make such a generalization. From my experience, there are studious boys and studious girls. I think it really depends on the person, not necessarily the gender. In fact, out of the most studious people I know, one is a guy that I went to uni with, and the other is a girl that I lived with. They were both incredibly diligent in their studies. I've heard that both girls and boys are more studious when they are in single-sex schools, but I don't think one gender is necessarily more studious than the others. The next word is generation gap. A lack of understanding between older and younger people that results from different life experiences. This is a very useful word because IELTS examiners love to ask you about the difference between young and old people. It's a very typical theme in part 1 and part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. Listen to the pronunciation, it's generation gap. Generation gap. The generation gap is smaller between children and younger parents, which means it's easier for them to relate to one another. This is a real sentence from a Band 9 essay that you can find at englishprotips.com, my website. Now we can talk about bridging the generation gap, which means making it smaller. And here is a model question and answer. Is there a large generation gap between old and young people in your country? I wouldn't say there is an especially large generation gap in the UK. I used to live in China, and I'd say that there seemed to be a much bigger difference between how the old and young think there, compared to the UK at least. I guess there are certain things that divide the old and young in the UK. One example is the monarchy. Apparently, the monarchy is a lot more popular with older people compared to the younger generations. Next word, sedentary. So what does sedentary mean? It means involving little exercise or physical activity. So usually sitting down, just like this person below me. Or like I'm doing right now, in fact. Right now I'm sedentarily working. I'm sitting down and I'm working. Sedentary. Sedentary. Increased work pressure is leading more people to lead a sedentary lifestyle as people spend longer hours at work. So we can talk about a sedentary lifestyle, a sedentary life, or a sedentary job. Why do you think more and more people are living a sedentary lifestyle? Well, I guess more of our work and leisure activities involve sitting still. For example, in the past, many people had jobs that involved traveling or working with their bodies or their hands. Nowadays, it's increasingly common to work with a computer. Similarly, in the past, we may have traveled to meet up with friends or done sports for fun. Nowadays, a lot of our leisure activities involve screen time, like playing with our smartphones or computer consoles. Okay. Next word, a balanced diet. A diet consisting of a variety of different types of food and providing adequate amount of nutrients necessary for good health. Balanced diet. Balanced diet. One of the most important things that you can do for yourself is eat a balanced diet. Is it important to have a balanced diet? Yes, for sure. Actually, saying that, I've heard a lot of diets where people don't eat carbohydrates at all, or diets that only consist of eating meat. I'm no nutritionist, and those kind of diets might actually be better for our health, but I've personally always tried to have a balanced diet full of fish, vegetables, fruit, that kind of thing. Face. Now, you know face as a noun, which means this part of your body, but do you know face as a verb? This is the kind of word that can really impress your examiner. Face means to deal with a difficult situation. Face. Same pronunciation, except we're using it as a verb. Governments are faced with the task of winning votes, so they need to deal with the task of winning votes, and it's a difficult thing to do. I face the IELTS exam next month. I hope I get my desired score. So to face the IELTS exam means to deal with the IELTS exam, to engage with the IELTS exam, hopefully to get your desired score. What difficulties do young graduates in your country face? At the moment, many young people in Britain face a very difficult and competitive job market. There aren't the same quantity of jobs that existed in the past. On top of that, we're facing a cost of living crisis, making it especially tricky to rent or buy a home. Inflation is growing, and gas and electricity are also more expensive than ever before. All of these are tough obstacles for young people in Britain to overcome. Next, we've got close-knit, involving groups of people in which everyone supports each other. Close-knit. Globalization has made it more difficult for close-knit families to stay together. So we can talk about a close-knit family, a close-knit community, a close-knit neighborhood. These are all common collocations. What are the advantages of living in a close-knit community? I'd say there are a lot of benefits. Probably the main one is just the joys of living near people that you know well and can rely on. Being close with your neighbors or simply other people that live in your community means that you have people to spend time with, to invite to dinner, to go to cafes with, that kind of thing. Nowadays, I think it's less common to have these kinds of close relationships with the people you live near. However, I'd say it's still important to try and maintain a close relationship with your community. Amenities. Structures intended to make life more pleasant or comfortable for people. Amenity. Many people move to urban areas to have better access to amenities such as leisure facilities and shopping centres. So improve or lack of amenities, some popular collocations, and you can also talk about basic, local, modern, public and social amenities. A great word to use in your IELTS test. And you would use this also in the writing test. Maybe more in the writing test than the speaking test, because we're often talking about public services and public amenities in the IELTS writing test. So what kind of amenities do you have within a 10-minute walk from your home? I live in the city centre, so I've got a lot of local amenities a stone's throw from my home. There's a few local schools, small shopping centres, and lots of cafes and restaurants. There's also a large sports facility, which was built recently, that has a swimming pool, badminton court, and a state-of-the-art gym. Residential. Relating to houses where people live rather than places where they work. Residential. 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 It is becoming increasingly common for residential areas to be moved further away from the city centres. So a residential neighbourhood, that's a great collocation. We can also talk about a residential area or residential care, which means when people help you in your home. Now, this word residential comes from the word resident, which is a noun, which means that people who live in a home or in an area. So you can say residents of London often complain about the uncomfortable transit from home to work. So which are the most expensive residential areas where you live? Well, in Edinburgh, there's an area called the Grange. When I was growing up, I remember my parents telling me that it was a particularly expensive place to live in. The houses there are very majestic and were built during the Victorian era. It's a long time ago. To be honest, I have no idea how much the houses there would cost, but my guess is that there will be some that are worth multiple millions. Densely. With a lot of things close together. Densely. Densely. Mexico City is one of the most densely populated cities in the world. So, densely populated or densely packed, these are great collocations you can use in your IELTS exam. We can also use the adjective form, dense. Dense cities are often loud and unruly. So, which is the most densely populated city in the country you live in? I'm not sure what the most densely populated city in Scotland is, to be honest. In the UK, I'd imagine it's London. I was born in South London and went to uni there, but I remember that it always felt incredibly busy, especially if you were travelling around the city during rush hour. However, now I live in Edinburgh in Scotland and it's not nearly as densely populated. In fact, a lot of people move up to Scotland from busy cities like London in search of a more tranquil pace of life. Outskirts. So, the area that forms on the edge of, for example, a city. The outskirts. Residential property tends to be cheaper on the outskirts of cities. So, outskirts of cities, outskirts of somewhere, outskirts of Edinburgh, outskirts of Cairo. And we can say reach the outskirts. So it takes 2 hours to reach the outskirts, meaning you have to take a bus or a train for 2 hours just to get to the outskirts, the area outside the city. So what are the outskirts of your city like? Well, in Edinburgh, where I'm living at the moment, the outskirts are rather industrial. There's a large bypass road, and that's where a lot of warehouses and large shopping centres are. To be honest, it's not a particularly pretty or exciting place to be, but the space allows for companies to have larger spaces, and there's a lot of large supermarkets, so that can be quite convenient. Affordable. Not expensive. Affordable. Affordable housing isn't enough. People also need job opportunities. Affordable home, housing, area, or price. Affordable is also a verb. Private individuals cannot afford to conduct meaningful research into new technology. Should the government subsidize housing to make it more affordable? Certainly. I think it's a great thing. Without subsidized housing, it can be almost impossible for people to afford rent or buy their homes outright. Saying that, it's pretty important that it's done in a transparent and fair way. It's all very well saying that it's good to subsidize housing, but the real question is how to choose who is eligible for subsidized housing or how much to subsidize the housing for in the first place. Endangered. In danger of being harmed, lost, or not existing, like the rhino below me. Endangered. It's important to enact laws prohibiting the hunting of endangered animals. Endangered species, endangered animals, endangered plants. Endanger is also a verb. There is no doubt that our actions endanger other species. Do you think that zoos and aquariums have a role to play in the conservation of endangered species? Part 3 question. Yes, I'd say they do. They can serve as important centers for research, education, and public awareness about endangered species, and can also contribute to breeding programs and the reintroduction of species into the wild. However, it's important that zoos and aquariums prioritize animal welfare and the fair treatment of animals. Congestion. A situation in which there is too much traffic and movement is difficult. Congestion. Imposing fines for driving in city centres is one way to reduce congestion in cities. Ease congestion, reduce congestion, relieve congestion. Road congestion, city congestion, traffic congestion. Congestion charge, which is when the city makes you pay some money to go into the city centre. Congested is an adjective. City centres are becoming increasingly congested as more people own private vehicles. What problems can occur as a result of traffic congestion? I'd say there are lots of problems caused by traffic congestion. So I used to live in Shanghai, where the traffic congestion was awful, especially around rush hour. One of the most noticeable effects was the amount of pollution. There was a lot of air pollution, but also noise pollution caused by the mass of cars that were trying to get to their destinations. However, a more subtle problem caused by traffic congestion is the social isolation and reduced sense of community. In major cities with a lot of traffic congestion, people spend more time commuting and less time interacting with neighbours and local community. Commute. To make the same journey regularly between work and home. Commute. It is exhausting to commute during rush hour. Commute as a noun. The commute to work is worse during rush hour. Commuter. Commuters often complain that the public transportation service is too cramped. So a commuter is someone who has to commute every day. So if you're someone that travels to work every day, you are a commuter. How long is your daily commute? Actually, nowadays I don't have to commute to work. Because I work from my computer, I'm able to do all my tasks from home. To be honest, it really suits me. I like working by myself and enjoy being able to cook at lunch time instead of going out to look for a cafe or eating in the office. All the same, one thing I miss about commuting is the extra exercise that I used to get from walking or cycling to work. In the past, I used to cycle to the school where I taught, but nowadays I simply roll out of bed and go straight to my computer. Homesick. Unhappy because of being away from home. Homesick. Students often feel homesick when studying abroad. Homesickness. International students don't usually suffer from homesickness after the first few months of studying abroad. How do people usually deal with feeling homesick when they are living in a foreign country? I guess there are a few different ways that people can deal with feeling homesick. Probably the most effective way is to stay connected with their loved ones back home through video calls, messages, or emails. I also believe that people will feel less homesick if they feel more comfortable and included in the new community they are staying with. One way to become more integrated in the community is to go out of your way to make friends and learn more about the country you are staying in. Culture shock. A feeling of confusion felt by someone visiting a country or place that they do not know. Culture shock. Learning about the country before you travel is an effective way to avoid culture shock. So, a great collocation, a real culture shock. Do you think it's important to learn about the culture of a country before visiting it to avoid culture shock? For sure, especially if the country is very different from your own. Understanding the customs, social norms, and etiquettes of a foreign country can help travelers feel more comfortable and confident in their interaction with locals. Additionally, being knowledgeable about the culture can help avoid unintentional misunderstandings or causing offense. I don't think you have to spend a lot of time learning all about the history of the country, but a little bit of research online or a travel guide can help you to better understand the culture you'll be visiting. Overwhelm. Overwhelm. So to have too much to deal with. Schools overwhelm students with too much homework and frequent exams to prepare for. So we can overwhelm with something or overwhelm by doing something. We've also got the adjective forms. Overwhelming. Regular exams can be overwhelming for students. Or overwhelmed if you're describing yourself. I feel overwhelmed when I have to write and listen at the same time. So you're not good at multitasking. Do you get overwhelmed easily? Not usually. I say that I'm pretty good at staying calm and focused. However, I do tend to get pretty overwhelmed when I have a lot of deadlines to meet. For example, when I have a lot of essays to give students feedback on. Enable. 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 To make someone able to do something or make something possible. The use of online search engines has enabled us to access huge quantities of information in a short period of time. How can teachers enable students to reach their potential? Well, they can help students to feel comfortable and confident. If students have low self-esteem or are worried about their performance, it can be especially difficult for them to reach their potential. So we have looked at 30 brilliant words that you can learn before your IELTS speaking test to get a top score for IELTS vocabulary, also known as lexical resource. The important thing at this stage is that you practice this vocabulary. So if you found some words that you want to learn from this list of 20, practice it. Practice it tonight, practice it tomorrow, then wait 2 days and then practice again, and then wait 4 days and then practice again, and then wait 8 days and practice again. By doing this spaced repetition, you are much more likely to learn this vocabulary. So, save this video, watch it again in 2 days' time, in 4 days' time, in 8 days' time, and go through these model answers. Also, download the PDF and take time just to study this in your own time, at home, before you go to bed, in the morning when you're drinking a nice cup of coffee. Best of luck with all of your studies, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye then.